He continued his education by obtaining a bachelor's degree in secondary education at Southern Benedictine. He met Mickey Campbell while at St. Bernard. Mickey, you can wave. All right, and they have been friends ever since. The two of them graduated with the same degree, but they definitely minored in pinball. If you're old enough to remember St. Bernard, there was a snack bar, and it was hard to get to a pinball machine because Mickey and Dave were in front of them. Both guys went on to obtain master's degrees in school administration at the University of Alabama and double A's at Alabama A&M. In 1974, I began working at Coleman Hospital in the lab. David began working there in environmental services and doing patient transports. As patients were admitted, he would put them in a wheelchair and bring them to the lab to have their blood drawn. I admit I thought he was cute, and apparently the feeling was mutual since he began appearing in the lab without patients. Well, it happened. What can I say? All right, we were both in high school. I was a sophomore at Coleman, and he was a junior at Holly Pond. His mom already had someone at their church picked out for him. Fortunately, my mom was the assistant director of nursing, and Dave's aunt was her secretary. Apparently, Aunt Betty gave me a good recommendation. We married at St. Bernard Abbey Church on July the 14th, 1978. Dave began his career as a teacher coach at Ryan School in Morgan County. The community atmosphere was a little bit different there. Many of the families were heavily invested in show horses. Since Dave was the coach, he had to take care of the field, and that field was used for many events. One night he answered the phone, and I heard him yell, "No, absolutely not." A parent had called him and wanted to know if they could have a Ku Klux Klan rally on the baseball field, complete with the white robes and a bonfire. Fortunately, Dave was offered a job as the elementary principal at Hanceville. He loved the kids and the teachers. Both of our sons, Andrew and Zachary, had their dad as their principal. Occasionally, one of our sons had to visit his dad on a professional basis. As the boys got older, our rec room was always filled with boys playing pool or in the pool swimming. And guys, raise your hand if you've been to my house swimming. Yeah, there's a lot of them, okay? All right, I learned to keep lots of cereal and milk. Every parent felt having a principal taking care of your child was a good idea. So Friday night after football game, it became pool lights and eating at our house. During semi-retirement, Dave enjoyed traveling the world with Bob and Peggy Burgess, Rick and Donna Bryant, and Charlie and Diane Herford. Now, one time we had to try to get Charlie from going across the river because he didn't have his passport and he was going into a different country when he crossed that water. But he's here, so everything turned out okay. All right. He also spent a great deal of time watching and napping during Gunsmoke, Bonanza, and Daniel Boone. He loved visiting his grandchildren, watching UGA baseball, Alabama football, and eating Dreamland ribs. Dave passed away at high noon on June the 14th. This was particularly fitting for a Western fan. When they came in, when they do say, hey, they're dead, one nurse comes in, she records the time, checks to make sure the heart stopped, and then they have to go get another nurse. Well, when they did that first call, I looked up at the clock and I thought, I hope Marshall Dillon is waiting for him. All right, it was also fitting that he passed away at Folsom Center, which is the old Coleman Hospital. I met him there and said goodbye to him there. Excuse me. David survived by our sons, Andrew, he's in the back there, and our daughter-in-law, Erica, who opened with the prayer, and their children, Hannah and Oliver. Zach Adams. Half the place is here for you, Zach. And our daughter-in-law, Jensen Jernigan Adams. They have 3 children, Kennedy, Emerson, and Shepherd. He also had 6 siblings. Jeannie Williams, her husband Bob, Terry Adams and his wife Suzanne, Tim Adams, one half-sister, Charlotte Adams, and then Vicki Adams. Also, another one up here, his youngest brother Mark and his wife Ashley. All right, there is one deceased sister, Rosanna Garrett, and a host of nieces and nephews. There is a program available, and basically what I did is ask some of these guys who have known David for years to tell stories about them. So they'll be going in the order that you've got on your handout. And I hope you enjoy learning a little bit more about David through the day. Thank you.
First of all, Miriam stole a little of my pinball story because we both had degrees in pinball.
Pretty much.
She knew to go to the Brahma room if she never needed David or me.
Well, and one time now, there was a young man who was a freshman who did not look where he was. Uh-oh. Mama Scott, you were okay. A young man on his motorcycle, loaded motorcycle, got on the motorcycle and did not bother to look up. Motorcycle hit me on campus, and I don't know if it was me or David that got there first to take care of me to the hospital, but it happened.
Yes, it did. But anyway, we spent a lot of time together at St. Bernard or Southern Benedictine, which is known as at that time. And I'll tell you a story about that right at the end too. But David and our careers, basically, they mirrored each other. We went to St. Bernard. We got a degree there. We got a teaching job, I think we both taught math, and we both coached. Then we both got principal's jobs. Then we both started working for a software company, well, originally out of Mobile, and ended up working for a same software company, but they had been bought out by a company in California. So it just step by step, we were together. We rode together. We told stories together. One thing that I wanted to make sure and say that every time David and I got in the vehicle to go to Birmingham or sometimes to Mobile, he wanted to talk about his family. He wanted to talk about his kids. And he did. And we both shared our experiences about our families. We love our families. And don't let anybody say different about David. And our last stop in our careers with the Power School is the name of the company. We met a lot of folks along the way, and I tried to let a few of the main ones know of Dave's passing. And I got things like, he was the best ever. He was my favorite. And this came from people that were living are living currently in Kentucky, in Missouri, in different places. So Dave made an impact all over, not just around here. But one thing, we did a lot of traveling too when we were doing the training. Not very far out, most of the time, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana. And my mama would always ask me, is David going with you? we never got to go together, hardly ever. But if I said yes, my mama didn't worry. And she met David one time. But that's what David left with people. They trusted him. They knew he was going to do what's right. For me personally, David was that person I could call middle of the night, anytime, if I needed just to talk. That was fine with David. If I needed advice, David would give advice. Anything I needed. He was that friend that says, if you need me, call me. He didn't just say it. He meant it. And that kind of brings me to, I want to kind of close with a little St. Bernard story that I don't know that Miriam truly knows the story, and I'm sure the boys don't. But as I said, we both taught math, or got our math degree. But I liked one class. And we both signed, well, he did too. We both signed up for the same class. It was abstract algebra. I'll never forget it. And I stayed a couple of sessions, and I finally told Dave, I'm good with my degree. I don't need math. And I didn't go back for a while. David told the father that I had been kidnapped by Arab terrorists. And he like the class before, not the last class, but the next to last class, David went back to the father and said, "They've recovered him. Can he take the final?" And I took the final and passed and got my degree. Anyway, David's my friend, and I'm going to miss him dearly. He's like a brother. Thank you.
Before the next person comes, who is Lionel Butler. Lionel goes to church here with us. He's also a retired deputy sheriff. Well, when Dave was in the hospital, things got kind of rough. And I don't just mean health-wise, I mean mentally also. So there were some guys from the Monday morning men's prayer breakfast who said, "We'll stay with him overnight, Miriam. It'll be fine." Well, a couple of mornings I walked in after all was supposed to be fine, and some of them, the eyes were bloodshot, and the hair was all over the place, and it was kind of tough. Well, the next night was Lionel Butler, and I said, "Now, Lionel," because I would stay all day and often all night. I said, "Lionel, he can get kind of rough at night." And he looked at me and he said, "Miriam, you forget that I was the jailer." And I want you to know, the next morning I walked in, and here is Lionel looking fresh as a daisy. And I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder if I can clone him. That would be wonderful. But, so Lionel is going to speak.
You never know who you're going to meet or what kind of person they are. David was a friend, a true friend. And like Miriam was saying, when he was in the hospital, he'd try to get out of bed. And I kept telling him, said, "David, you can't get up." So a little bit I told him, I said, "I'm going to report you to the principal's office." I didn't have any more trouble that night. But I saw Miriam was having a hard time, and if you can't help when help is needed, you're not much of a person. And David and Miriam, true friends. Love both of them to death. Even though she does correct me in Sunday school. And I guess that's a teacher in her. But I never saw David lose his temper. He was always just sweet, quiet David. And I'd do anything in the world if I could shake his hand and hug him again. But he's a true friend. And all of you that knew him know what I'm talking about. And I got my Alabama shirt on for him. Because that's one thing that you could get along with David if you was an Alabama fan. And when David first started coming to St. Andrews, I had a long history with principals. I've been to all of them's office, spent time there, and we got a couple of them in the crowd tonight. But when I realized David was a principal, I couldn't believe it. I could get along with a principal. And I'm going to miss him, really miss him. Thank you.
Amen.
I met David Adams in the summer of 1992 when I became principal at Hansville High School. David was the elementary principal. He was a lot of help in getting to know just the lay of the land and that sort of thing. We went to eat lunch at Luna's on several occasions that summer, one of which we stayed after we got done eating, and Zach was with him because Zach just liked coming to school. Before he actually started school, he liked coming to school in the summer with his dad. And so the three of us were eating lunch in this booth at Luna's. David and I continued to talk afterwards, and when we turned around to look, Zach had pretty much painted the whole booth with ketchup. I mean, it was everywhere on him and the seat and the table and the booth. Those conversations happened a good bit, but mostly David was pretty quiet. I remember one time we were going to a meeting in Montgomery, just the two of us, and we had conversations that Mr. Campbell talked about a few minutes ago till we got to about Birmingham. And from Birmingham to Montgomery, we rode, and neither of us said a word the whole way, just quiet, and that was fine. Being with him was just special by itself. But when he did say something, you need to pay attention because it was important or it was funny as all get out. We were on one of those trips Marion was talking about, and it was one of the early ones. And so going through security at Atlanta Airport was a little scary for some of us anyhow. And as we went through the security lines, they scanned Peggy's bag and pulled it out to the side and her out to the side to further security. The same time in the line beside that, same thing happened to David. So he's standing over there and they're frisking him, and Peggy's over here, and he looks over at her and says, "This is a fine mess you've gotten us into." I think it was somewhere close to 2000 when we were on our way home from a football game one night and stopped to let the wives go to the bathroom, and in the car he told me that he had a doctor's appointment that day, and I asked how things went, and he said everything's fine except there's just one thing they need to check. Okay, and the ladies came back, we didn't get to talk anymore. Over the process of probably the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, he had another doctor's appointment to follow up how things go. Everything's great except there's just one thing they need to check. They did that like 3 times. A month later, we were in the waiting room at Huntsville Hospital while he was undergoing open heart surgery. he recovered from that and did super. We played golf and played golf a lot. For a while, it was Henry Burns and Dave and I that played every week, at least once a week, and sometimes more than that. And he came up with some of the wildest side bets you could ever come up with. You know, longest drive or closest to the pin, those kind of things. But David, if you got on the green inside the length of the flagstick, or if you chipped it in, or the longest putt, or if you made a par after you'd been in the sand. I mean, it took us longer sometimes to decide how many dimes we owed each other after the round than it took to play the round itself. But he liked golf, and we were playing in Foley, Alabama. He and I one afternoon. Peggy and Miriam and Dave and I had gone to the Grand for day or two, and it was when he first started showing signs of being a bit unsteady, and we played for a while, and after a while I said, Dave, what's going on with you? What's up? Oh, nothing. I'm just a little tired. That's all. He just didn't want us to worry. He didn't want to be a burden, and that's the way he was. A month ago, when he was in Folsom Center for his rehab, I went to visit, and he had a really, really good day. We had, serious conversation. He did good. Talked about a whole bunch of things, and one of the things we talked about was a trip that we took as representatives of this church to Pittsburgh to go through a week-long training to be Stephen leaders in our Stephen ministry program. And I talked about that a little bit. He said, I remember that week. And I was so glad he did, because it meant so much to me. That week, we roomed together for the week. And the training was super intensive. And some of our conversations those nights were that way too. And I came home from there knowing that he could be trusted and depended on, not only as a Stephen leader, but as a friend, as a father, as a husband. It's the kind of legacy any of us should be proud to leave. Rest in peace, David.
I met David here at St. Andrews probably 25 years ago in our Sunday school class. And y'all know David was quiet. Matter of fact, he was so quiet that he was like the old commercial, if E.F. Hutton speaks, everybody listens. Well, David, like Bob said, if David said something, it was very important and it was very funny. But he was so quiet that people really didn't know I don't think people knew how funny David was. But I got to know him best throughout our travels. And I didn't know very, very much about it at that time, about David's health history, about his open heart surgery and so forth. But I observed David's eating habits. And David always ate grilled chicken, or always ate grilled salmon, always ate salad, never ate anything that was unhealthy. And I just, at some point in time, I decided that if David can do it, I can do it too. So David was an inspiration to me, and he's the reason that right now, today, I weigh 177 and not 227. But he was an inspiration in other ways too. I remember we had driven to Atlanta. We were catching a plane the next morning to Switzerland. Miriam came down to the lobby. I got down to the lobby, and Miriam said, she was almost in tears. Maybe she was in tears, and she said, Rick, you got to talk to David. I said, what's wrong? She said, he's not going. So I said, well, let me go talk to him. So I asked David, I said, David, what's wrong? He just had recuperated from hip surgery, but it had been a few months. And he just said, well, I think I'm going to be a burden to everybody. And I just looked at him. I said, no, you're going on this trip. I said, Bob and I'll be with you. And I said, if something happens, if we have to, we'll pick you up and carry you. So David was okay with that. So we went on to Switzerland, and I just remember there was a waterfall or something that had these probably 150 steps, and David made it up those steps fine. So he was good to go on that. But the inspiration that he gave me as a human being was even more important than his eating habits. I never saw David say anything bad about anybody. Never heard David say anything bad. I never heard him say anything negative. I never heard him loud or argumentative. I never heard David complain. So all of these I know at least 8 different foreign countries that we visited. I never heard David say anything out of the way to anybody. And so as he became less and less mobile, he attended our Monday morning men's group here at St. Andrews. So we have a Monday morning men's prayer breakfast. And Miriam would drop him off sometimes, and he would need a ride home. Well, I would take David home, and if I didn't say a word, he wouldn't say a word. But I could ask him a question. He would always answer the question. I always knew I could talk about Alabama football to him. But David, as a human being, was one of the most inspirational people that I've ever known. And we will miss David dearly.
Like these other guys, and I'm one of the members of the men's prayer group here at St. Andrews. And David really enjoyed being at men's prayer group. And Miriam was working down at the college, and at that time I believe it was the college, Miriam, and she mentioned to me one week that they were having trouble because David got where he couldn't drive, and so he was going to have to start missing. And so I told her, I said, Miriam, if you can bring David as you go to work, I've got a room full of men that'll fight over who gets to take him home that day. And we did that. But I sort of like Rick Bryant. Lots of times I'd get in that car and we'd drive all the way to Vinemont. He was enjoying the ride, you could tell that, but he didn't say a word. Well, this one particular day, and I've really tried to think about this. He was sitting over there and he started talking, and whatever he said, I replied, and the next thing you know, I'm over there cracking up. He had told me a joke. And I laughed all the way to Vinemont, all the way back to Cullman, and then when I went in the house, I said, Sandra, David told me a joke. He had a great sense of humor. And so then I got better to know him through those trips back and forth to Vinemont. Then a month or 3 ago, whenever, I don't know how long it's been, when he was in the hospital and we spent the night up there together, I got to know him some more. And I don't know if there's a Mr. Jacobs out here now that's a full adult, but most of that night, he sent you down to room 105. And I sort of got the feeling that wasn't good. But he was a good friend. When I first got to come into St. Andrews, I'm a people watcher, and I would watch David. And I was amazed at the number of things that David Adams did within the church that nobody knew about. The coffee would be made, or this or that. And it was David Adams doing it behind the scenes. He was a true friend. I will miss him dearly. And I will miss those rides, even though we didn't talk much. I will miss those rides to Vinemar.
You won't find my name on the program, but I am Mark Adams. I'm the youngest of the 7 Adams kids that were born to Grant and Audie Adams, and nobody's ever really told me for certain, but I'm not sure that I was actually planned. I kind of got off the. If you go back and look at the years in between the other kids, I was an outlier. So, several years ago, Dr. Sam Parker, some of you may know him, an educator who taught, I think, every one of us at some stage of our lives, from Welty Junior High School all the way to Wallace. He put it this way when I enrolled in his psychology class. He said, "Well, Mr. Adams, are you the last of them?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'm the last one." And I'm here to testify to what every one of these men have said. As his brother, David and I've said this several times, we could have driven to New York City and back and never said a word to each other. But when he said something, I always listened. Each of my 3 brothers and 3 sisters have always been a hero in some way, to me. Each one of them colors my life in a different and most unique way. But David was the superstar. And that's, not to give him too much undue credit. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that he was the oldest boy in the family. He was about 20 when I was 5 or 6, so you can imagine me looking up to him.
Mark wants to tell you that he was the ring bearer
Well,
at our wedding.
I'm going to get to that, and I'm going to get to that, and I'm going to give you some grief about it. But I can remember, there's very few things that I remember from, like early childhood, but I remember when David moved out because it devastated me. I thought that I had lost him forever. I learned later that, that he wasn't gone forever, but I guess that was my first experience with like the emotion of just like a searing loss, was when David moved out of the house. Dave was an awesome older brother. I remember thinking as a kid that everything he did just had a coolness to it. He dressed cool, he walked around cool, he talked cool. It was just, yeah. So he had that mustache, He could make those no-bake cookies that I love so much. As I was reminded, constantly through pictures and stuff, he was able to catch a catfish with nothing more than a stick, some string, and a safety pin. And plus, he had a car that had an 8-track player in it. All of those things are gold in the court of childhood recesses. And when you're at school, you get to brag about your older brother, and I was able to brag about David a whole lot. David had a great sense of humor, as you can tell from what people have said. He had a very quick smile, and he's always seemed to make all of us happy. Here's a few facts about David. David gave me my first Star Wars action figure. Again, as a 5 or 6 year old kid, that was tremendous. He gave me that as payment for being the ring bearer in the wedding, because Star Wars was such a big deal that year. That was my first, action figure. And later in life, David gave me my first real baseball glove when I graduated from junior high school. David took me to my first Alabama football game. David took me to my first Atlanta Braves game. At some point, I began to realize that most of my allegiances in life came from David. As a kid, I became attuned and then excited about those things, Alabama football and Atlanta Braves baseball, because of David. Much later, David helped me in a decision that I had about becoming a teacher. I had started into education classes, and I called David one time and I said, "Hey, I think I'm making a mistake. I don't know that I'm cut out to be a teacher." As you who've gone through education can testify that some of those classes that you have to take to become an educator, you just don't feel like you're ever going to use that stuff in education. And so I think David and I, believe it or not, probably talked about an hour during this crisis in my life. And I think the sage advice that he ended with was that he said, look, you're not going to ruin a kid so bad that somebody else can't fix them later on. But in all seriousness, and some of my students are out here, so maybe they can testify. In all seriousness, he calmed my nerves and stilled my resolve. And I've had a great career, as an educator. I'm still in education. Worked for this man back here for a long time, and I can tell you, hundreds of students, that had David as an elementary principal, and then had me as a 12th grade English teacher. All those kids would say, "I can't believe you're Mr. Adams' brother." I can't believe you're Mr. Adams' brother. Then that led into, I can't believe that you were Mr. Adams' ring bearer, because Miriam was a middle school science teacher, and that's the first thing she would tell kids is, that guy in the high school, he was my ring bearer when he was like this tall. And so I got those two things, and of course, as a 12th grade English teacher, I remember that advice David gave me, and I'm like, dang it, Dave. Now I'm the guy that's the last line of defense before the kids get out, and I got to fix the problems that somebody else caused. But I can tell you that all those kids, they loved Mr. Adams as principal. They all talked about Mr. Adams as their principal, that he was the best principal that they ever had. And as people have said, David just seemed to understand you, just seemed to understand what you needed to hear at the time that you were asking for advice. I could always ask him for advice, and I did through the years. I don't remember any harsh words from David. I never remember an argument that I had with David. Don't get confused. It wasn't all sunshine and butterflies, because David did try to teach me to play golf, and that did not go over very well. So, and a lot of this stuff, that I've mentioned is, it's just trivial and simple things. An action figure, a baseball glove, some ball games, a little bit of advice. But these are connections that I always have to my brother. And, every time that I watch a football game, I think about that image of him so excited about Alabama football, and that's etched into the blank slate of my heart forever. And those things are what, it was an expression of love from this good man to his kid brother. And each one of those, each moment of life with David, as my older brother, meant the world to me, and it always will. David was a good man. He was a man of faith, as has been said, and so we know that his spirit lives on eternally. But I think his goodness lives on too. In the words that have been said today, you see these two good men behind us back here, Andy and Zach. They have become good men because of David. You see that in the countless lives of his former students who have been made better for knowing David. And hopefully a little bit of his goodness lives on in me as well. So, thank you.
There's a lot of people here today. Standing room only. Hello, my name is Andrew Adams, or Andy, some people call me. I'm the firstborn son of David, Dad, Papa. Now, of all the things that I could inherit from my dad, I inherited his quietness. I'm definitely afraid of public speaking, so I don't talk much. So please give me some grace, and I'm probably going to read this thing like a book report. Although I'm very quiet, that also makes me a very good listener. You can just ask my wife. She would say maybe I listen 70% of the time, which is a passing grade in my book. My mother mentioned us sharing something special about him, and my dad deserves the best because he was the best. I'm not a perfect dad, no one is, but I do try to imitate my father because God blessed me with one of the best this side of heaven. So today, I'm going to share with you some lessons that I learned that he taught me on how to be the dad that I am today. Dad was a quiet man. Honestly, we never talked much. Now, granted, we enjoyed and loved each other without words. When we were alone, we enjoyed our gentle peace of silence. Honestly, most of our conversations lasted maybe about 5 minutes. We could drive from Coleman to Tuscaloosa without speaking a word. Did this bother me? No. I learned my father's love language was his presence and learned to adapt and honestly copy it. He was from a generation where fathers didn't talk about mushy stuff or love with their sons. Luckily, Dad was also from the Andy Griffith generation. It must have softened him up some. He doesn't necessarily use words to teach me, he used actions. I knew from a shadow of doubt he loved his sons very much. Here are a few fun stories or facts that I remember about my father. He was an avid golfer. He played every Saturday. Honestly, that's how he taught us to catch pop flies, is he would take a sand wedge, he would pop it up, and me and Zach would catch pop-ups out in the yard. I think he taught us this because pretty much I only played outfield or bench when I was in school. So, I mean, I definitely appreciate that. Now, Dad actually did have a hole-in-one one time, and actually it is one of the balls that I thought had lost. But good news is now my brother has it, and it has been found. So it kind of stole some of my thunder from a story I was going to tell. I have one fishing story about Dad. Don't think that Dad, when he got older, really liked fishing that much. He went a few times with me, probably just because I enjoyed fishing. But anyways, one time, Papaw took me and Zach fishing. Zach may not remember this, but we caught around 30 fish at I think it was Brother Ralph's pond. And Zach had caught one 3-pound catfish. They were all brim and they were all shellcracker. And Papaw sent us home with every single fish. I remember excitedly watching Dad clean them like I was a great fisherman supplying my family with food. Now, as an adult, I know that would have driven me insane to clean that many brim. It had to be torture picking every fish out of that bucket after you clean the last. Shellcracker are definitely not worth the time to clean. We're not talking about lobster. This taught me to persevere for my children's joy. Speaking of joy, Dad would sometimes play video games with me. It's something that actually me and my son do a lot of now. One game in particular was a basketball game that I know some of us know called Double Dribble, or Rubble Ribble, what I used to call it. I was amazing at this game. This game was on the Nintendo, and there was a certain spot if you jumped out of bounds, it would go in for 3 every time. I had just watched the Wizard movie, and I was ready to go to the Nintendo Championships myself. Granted, I could hardly touch my older cousins or uncles, but I always beat Dad, and I destroyed Zach at the game every time we played. Granted, Zach probably hadn't started kindergarten at that time, but a win was a win in my book. And it absolutely killed Zach every time I beat him. One time after beating Zach, I don't remember the exact score. One time after beating Zach, he cried and threw a temper tantrum. And after correcting Zach, Dad played me again. I don't remember the exact score, but Dad beat me by at least 30 points that day. I was old enough to realize that every time Dad had played me, he let me win. And he told me, you don't have to win every time, son. Sometimes it's better to let others win. This taught me humility and love. And as a father, it's much more joyful to let your kids win. You get so much more pure emotion watching their reaction and celebration than getting the W yourself. I think Dad was telling me that you wouldn't remember the win of the game, but you will definitely remember the joy you gave someone in that one particular moment. Also, my dad loved Alabama football. He carried us every Saturday in the fall for years, and it was great. We had lots of amazing memories from those games, and honestly, now that I think about it, we may have been a curse. Alabama really didn't start winning on a regular basis until we stopped going. At least titles that I know of. Now, the love for college sports also transferred to my brother. He did sports medicine in college and was a student trainer for the Alabama Crimson Tide. So since Zach was working with the team, he also got us guest passes, which was awesome. We got to sit beside the players' parents, and it was great memories. Now, Dad was one of those rare special fans that you rarely see anymore. Some of you remember those guys that always brought the programs, had the little radios to listen to Eli Gold, and a pair of binoculars around his neck. Some of you guys know who I'm talking about because I've been to, excuse me, I'm so sorry, because I've been to some of the games with you, and you did the exact same thing. Dad was one of these people. One particular game, I remember Julio Jones breaking for a big reception. I yelled, "Dad, can you believe that? Look at Julio." To my surprise, Dad wasn't watching the game. He was doing this, which I left my binoculars over there. But he was looking around, and more importantly, he was doing this. To my surprise, Dad wasn't watching the game then. He was watching my brother. He wanted to know what Zach was doing at all times during the game, as if Zach was competing in the game himself. This lesson taught me to focus what is on really important. Drown out the noise and the focus. Let the world get blurry every once in a while to watch what really matters. My last story that I have to share with you happened recently. As much of you know, my dad's battles with Parkinson's, which originally led to dementia and other issues. He required constant help to do everyday tasks that many of us take for granted. He also required constant observation to keep him from falling or hurting himself. And I will be forever grateful to my mother for all that she has done for him. From ER visits, the dozens of doctor's appointments per month, and constant supervision, she taught me the true vision of marriage. In sickness and in health, to death do us part. One weekend when I was giving my saint of a mother a break, Dad and me were sleeping in the recliners. You had to sleep beside him in case he ever got up at night, which always happened multiple times, so you never got any deep sleep because you were always going to worry on what would happen. So this one night when I was on Dad duty, I woke up to Dad talking on phone with someone. He was talking to a woman and I panicked. My dad had called 911 because he thought I was an intruder. My wife says that I woke him up because of my loud snoring. That anyone would think that they're sleeping next to a monster because he called 911. Anyways, an officer was called out and he understood the situation. But I think I still may be listed as a person of interest in Coleman County. From watching my dad suffer these past years, I can truly say Parkinson's seems like a prison to me. My dad commented that when he was going back to sleep that night, that he truly hates this disease. I know he felt that he was behind bars in his own body. So if you know of any family dealing with Parkinson's or dementia, please reach out to them. Even better, pray for them. They are going through one of the toughest seasons in their lives. In closing, I am very thankful for Mom for carrying this weight throughout the years. I respect and love you so much. Thanks to my wife for helping guide us and helping us take care of it. Thanks to Zach and Jensen for being there and helping us make clear decisions. And thanks to all of you for being here to remember my father today. Now I would like to close reading this verse. 1 Corinthians 15, 42 through 45. So will it be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown is perishable, but it is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, but it will be raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body. It will be raised a spiritual body. My dad is not suffering anymore. because he will be born anew. Thank you.
All right. Hannah, Oliver, Kip, and Emmy, if my lips are moving and nothing's coming out, I need you to move those shakers. Okay? Excellent. I love it. Anybody else, feel free to name your favorite golf course, your favorite Beatles song, Andy Griffith episode, whatever will happen. Yes. Charles David Adams, follower of Christ, son, brother, uncle, husband, dad, teacher, golfer, coach, principal, papa. And lately a fighter. I'm not one to preach that the Lord gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers, but the good Lord gave Dad plenty of battles to fight over the last 10 years. However, he's no longer in a prison built by those diseases. As another David penned in Psalm 23, my dad is no longer wanting. He is laying down in green pastures and being led by his Savior beside still waters, and the Lord has restored his soul. Growing up, he was a quintessential gentle giant. Mom would have to check his pulse long before any disease took hold. The man could nap on command, and it was usually golf on those Sunday afternoons giving those orders. My mom may tell you that the to-do list wasn't always completed, and to this day, the garage is still a mess. But he never missed a game, whether I was playing, and as mentioned, passing out water and Band-Aids, to eventually patrolling the dugout. He was never the largest man, but he certainly had his dad's strength in reserve. No bigger time than that December afternoon when we were covering our pool. Somehow, some way, I ended up in the pool. Maybe I slipped, or I was pushed, and found myself in the water. I felt like I floated when that man pulled me up by the hood of those starter jackets. We had an old blue-gray tank. It's about the size of an S10. I got to sit in the middle on the way to school. I had to sit spread eagle so Dad could shift gears. That was about the time Dad instilled a 15-minute radio rule. Andy started every day in charge of the radio station. And when Dad'ums heard a word he didn't like, he got to control the station for 15 minutes. And that's how I grew up on the Beatles, the Beach Boys, and the Temptations. We eventually upgraded to a bigger and maybe even older blue truck. Had dual gas tanks, which was a thing in the 90s. Also known as the time you could get paddled at school. Once by your teacher, several of them are in attendance, and depending on the offense, by your principal as well. And again by your principal when y'all got home from school. But back to that old blue truck with 2 gas tanks. I don't know if my mom knows this, but the fuel gauge really never worked. So that led to a lot of flipping back and forth while praying we got to where we were going. But you better believe Andy got a Mustang when he graduated, and I drove a shiny red truck, even after I backed our minivan into the power pole in Cody Jackson's front yard. That thing came out of nowhere. It's a good time to mention, Dad was never mad, but boy, could he be disappointed. He learned that from the long hours and hours of Andy Griffith. Like the time I dropped a 4-letter word in the rec room while playing pool against somebody in this very room. Upon intense interrogation, I confessed I had heard it on the golf course while playing with Dad and his buddies. The look on Mom's face was very different than it is today. While it was probably true, I knew I broke a code that day and knew he was disappointed. Speaking of codes, Mr. Burgess, I was glad you mentioned the Saturday morning golf outings. I was glad you went over the ways y'all kept score. Dad would walk in the house smiling from ear to ear. I'd ask, Dad, did you win? Sure did, son. We tied the front, and I birdied 12 and 17. I also made a 20-footer on 8, so I won $2.75. And I'm still confused on how that happens. Oh, man. I'm sorry for this one. There were a ton of lessons learned in the rec room. When I was little, the walls were white with this sweet wallpaper border, these ducks. Looked like they were swimming around you. Well, they decided the room needed to be crimson to match the Daniel Moore Alabama paintings Dad had accumulated over the years. We took a pizza break, and when I walked back into the rec room, Dad had painted Miriam as a sexy thing. I'm going to pause for effect. Along a 20-foot section. The letters were taller than me. I had no clue what it meant, but Mom's face turned the same color as the new walls, and they were in a great mood the rest of the day. Hannah, you came along and kept Papa young, and I can't thank you enough for that. Yes. Oliver Grant was next. You were as big and strong as Papa by the time you turned 6. When our Kip was born, he and Mimsy got out of bed at 2 a.m. to come meet you. Probably the proudest moment of my life. Emerson joined the party a couple years later. Papa always said you're one of the funniest people he ever met. Which brings me to a story no one in this room knows. Sorry, babe. I only told one person, and he's about to look down on me from heaven and help me tell it. My beautiful wife, Jensen, had a 5-month-old baby boy in her arms a little earlier. With the 2 girls, we really didn't have any experience with boy names. And those 2 young girls can be very opinionated and extremely persuasive when given the chance. So the 4 of us struggled to lock in on a name. So I did what many of these people had mentioned when I needed advice. I called David Adams. As a man of many words, he responded, well, it's been raining here. Why don't you name him Noah? Well, sadly, that went 0 for 3 at the dinner table that night. But Kip, and I think Kip actually threw up a big X. But Noah got me thinking, and a plan began to grow. The next time we played the Name Your Baby Brother game at the dinner table, I threw out the name Shepherd. I think the initial vote was 2 for the yeas, 1 abstained, and another X from Kip. I decided not to come on too strong, but I like to think those little girls get their persuasiveness from their daddy. So on February 5th, Shepherd Scott Adams was born. Kip, who's the most famous shepherd you know? So I will fight to mold him into the man as Papa would want him to be. The way it was shown to me while eating countless watermelon in the gravel driveway and riding shotgun in that old blue truck. And if I raise him into half the man as Papa was, an angel looking down from heaven will certainly not be disappointed. Charles David Adams. There were thousands of kids that got to call you Mr. Adams. Hundreds of friends and family that call you David. 5 of my favorite people that call you Papa. But there are only 2 people on earth that got to call you Dad. I consider myself blessed and highly favored that God chose me to be one of them. I love you, Dad.
On behalf of the family, thank you for being here this afternoon to celebrate the life and the legacy of David Adams. Let us pray together. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for sharing David with us. We thank you for his love, for his presence, for his faith, for his family, and for his love for anyone and all that he knew. His love for all of the children and all the lives he changed in his life, and the difference that he made for so many who knew him. We thank you, Lord God, and we celebrate because we know he is celebrating today. Be with the family, watch over them, pour your love and grace out upon them, that in all things they may know how much you love them. Keep all of us safe as we return home. And may all of us remember David and have someone else in our lives as special as David. For it is in your blessed and holy name that we pray. Amen.
For the family, there will be a reception down in our, what would you call it, Robert? Thank you, Fellowship Hall. Thank you, Bob. You may, let's see, who can lead you down there? Okay, Bob's going to lead. Am I surprised? Okay. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And have a great day.